by Manulife. My name is Ian McLean. I'm the President and CEO of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we do live and work on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples, as we seek a renewed relationship based on a foundation of mutual understanding and respect. As participants in today's event, we are coming together as one. We believe everyone is free to be their true self and receive the same respect and opportunity, regardless of age, ethnicity, gender, culture, identity, sexual orientation, beliefs, or language. We hope you'll join us in fostering a positive environment here today to ensure a safe and welcoming space for all. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors of today's event, our partners and sponsors. Without them, these events don't happen. So thank you to our title sponsor, Manulife, and Chris is here representing Manulife. Our prestige sponsor is Deloitte. Our platinum sponsor, Google. Silver sponsor, Clack. Our bronze sponsor, the KW Association of Realtors. And our event partner today, the Guelph Chamber of Commerce. And thank you to our hosts, Cellar 52 and Guilt Caterings, for your hospitality. Please join us in welcoming or thanking these incredible partners. I'd also like to extend a welcome to the following folks in attendance today. Barry Verbannig was with us earlier today, the Mayor of Kitchener. He's joining us online. Catherine Fife, the MPP for Waterloo, is joining us in person here. And from our board of directors, joining us virtually, Adam Smith, our chair, and Scott Gilfillan, our vice chair. And thank you to everyone who is joining us virtually today as well. At this time, I'd like to welcome Andrew Kluger from Manulife to introduce today's speaker. Andrew.
Thanks a lot, Ian. Good afternoon. On behalf of Manulife, we are proud to be sponsoring the Provincial Leaders Speaker Series once again. Manulife has more than 8,000 employees in Ontario, and 1/3 of those are here in the in Kitchener-Waterloo. We take pride in our people, products, and services, such as insurance, protection, well-being offerings, and retirement and wealth management solutions. At Manulife, we truly care about the health of Ontarians, and we believe that our industry has an important role to play in their overall health, well-being, and quality of life. I now have the pleasure of introducing today's speaker. Andrea Horwath is the daughter of a unionized auto worker and proud to be born and raised in working-class Hamilton. She's the woman who protects workers, not the powerful. She stands up for local businesses, not big box stores, and believes in investing in healthcare in our kids, not cutting. Andrea's dad was an immigrant who came to Ontario from Czechoslovakia to build a better life, and her mom's family has lived in Hamilton for generations. Andrea paid her way through university waiting tables. After graduation, she worked in Hamilton at the Downtown Legal Aid Clinic. As a housing advocate, she saw how hard it was already getting people to make ends meet and get ahead of the bills. She wanted to help. Elected to Hamilton City Council in 1997, she did everything she could to fight for people and the small local businesses in the ward, and it paid off. In 2004, the working folks of Hamilton Centre sent her to Queen's Park, and in 2009, New Democrats across the province chose her as their leader. She's focused on rebuilding and improving education and healthcare, fighting for the next generation, and finally, giving working people the respect they deserve. She's a fighter for climate justice, for true universal Medicare, for making households affordable, and for making all long-term care and home care public and not-for-profit. Please join me in welcoming Andrea Horwath.
Well, thank you. Beyond there we go. Well, thank you, Andrew. I appreciate the continued support of Chris and the entire Manulife team. Andrew, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. We have a lot to cover, so we'll jump right in. I did note in your introduction in 1997, you started your political career, and I started the first of 2 election losses in a row. So congratulations to you. 1997 was a better year for you than me. One of the things that I think we've all identified in the work that we do with the Best Waterloo, the Business Economic Support Team of Waterloo Region, which is the 2 chambers, our partner from Guelph as well, Shakiba, who's joined us here as well from the Guelph Chamber of Commerce, but Communitech, Explore Waterloo, which is Hospitality and Tourism, and Waterloo Economic Development Corporation, is over the last 2 years, we've identified that the shutdowns that we've had to endure really are the limitations on the healthcare system. But schools closing and the improvements that we need to make in our high schools and our elementary schools, hospitals, those are the things that are essential to making sure that we don't have to have another shutdown. So let me start with, and this is you've been a big proponent along with Catherine of All Day Two-Way Go, and I don't know if we need to turn that mic off, because it's getting a lot, there we go, a lot of feedback. But All Day Two-Way Go is something that has been committed to, it's in progress, and we expect all the parties to continue to make sure that that is followed through on. It's hugely important to connect Waterloo Region to Toronto. But our next ethanol pledge for all the political leaders is going to be around the healthcare investment that we need here in the region of Waterloo. Waterloo Region is the fastest growing area in the country. We know that over the next 20 years, the community we serve will go larger and older. We'll be over 900,000 people within 20 years. We know that our region has, up at the start of COVID, had the least, fewest beds per capita than anywhere across the province. We know that we've had an improvement and a renovation at the Cambridge Memorial Hospital, but we haven't seen much of anything in terms of new hospital from St. Mary's or Grand River. And our healthcare infrastructure is a barrier to our region fully reaching its potential. So given, and then there's lots of competing interests. I would say there's needs right across the province, but certainly for here in Waterloo Region, will your government, if you're elected in June, support the improvements in healthcare that are required here, starting with the study, I think it's $12 million that's required to do the next phase for Health Ontario, to make sure that we do the study and then we can go down the path and make this commitment to Waterloo Region for a new hospital, for the hospital services we need here in Waterloo Region.
Yes. I'm only kidding. So first of all, thank you. And I really want to thank both chambers for inviting me to be here today. Certainly, we know that health infrastructure is extremely important. And the responsibility of government is to make sure that as communities grow, as the pressure increases on existing infrastructure, that's where government needs to come in to make sure that that growth is sustainable. And the only way that that growth is sustainable over time is if soft and hard infrastructure is keeping up. And so, yes, absolutely. We've talked about this already at our table, if you will, at the official opposition table. Your MPPs that sit on our benches, Catherine Fife and Laura May Lindo, have already jointly sent a letter to the sitting government pressuring them to put that planning funding in place to get the ball rolling, to make sure that the hospital comes to fruition. But the first phase, of course, is that planning funding, and it's something that we're absolutely committed to.
One of the things, and again, the reason we talk about this, we are into the next phase of COVID, which is the reopening of the province. One of the things that I think we talked about earlier this morning with a smaller group was the importance of reopening, but staying open and doing it safely. There is no one, small businesses can't afford, and frankly, the communities are not going to accept that our next step, if we have another wave, which I think most people expect that we will, it's how we manage through that wave. So I guess the theme for these discussions with all the political leaders is what's the plan to open, reopen, and stay open safely. There's lots of COVID in the community right now. We're seeing that across the province. There are challenges that are going to come as we go through the summer and back into the fall. It does beg the question: what is your philosophy or planning around things like vaccinations, free rapid antigen screening kits, which our chambers collectively across the province have given away millions, and in this region, over 1 million kits have been given away to Waterloo Region businesses. Monitoring in terms of wastewater signals. What happens when we have increases? How are we going to manage that as a province?
Well, first of all, I want to identify the leadership role that this particular chamber took in the access to rapid antigen tests. I think you did a fantastic job with your pilot, and it made a huge difference at keeping people at work and businesses open. In fact, I'm going to tell, maybe it's not going to be a secret anymore because we're streaming this, but my first rapid antigen test that I did at home came from your pilot project because of your MPP here, Catherine Fife. It was her proactivity that gave me the opportunity to make sure that I could get to work every day with peace of mind, knowing that I was testing negative. And so I think what you've identified are exactly the things that we have to commit to, making sure we have everybody getting the continued access to rapid antigen tests. We know that some of the extended closures that we faced here in Ontario weren't faced in other provinces in the same way. I think of BC particularly, because governments responded more quickly and more robustly when it comes to the funding of access to rapid antigen tests, the PCR tests. I mean, there's just a need when you're in a crisis like this. That's when government needs to step up and make the investments. And so certainly the access to vaccines was another big one that we were concerned about in terms of particularly vulnerable populations and vulnerable businesses in some parts of Ontario. But these are pieces that have to be, they can't be put now back on a shelf and say it's all over. We have to make sure we're continuing to provide access to both kinds of the tests, the monitoring, PPE. You know that we advocated for government-paid sick days to try to make sure that when people were sick, they were able to take the time off and not spread in the workplace, while still ensuring that businesses weren't overburdened with the cost of those kinds of initiatives. So we've learned a lot. And we need to remember what we've learned and be better at being responsive. And I do want to say that it's troubling to see. This morning, I woke up to a newscast that said we're already in, the sixth wave, and I think people treasure and cherish where we are now and don't want to go backwards. And so we can prevent going backwards by making sure that we're doing all of the things that need to be done to keep people from getting extremely sick and overwhelming our healthcare system.
Well, I think that it's an important point. I mean, there's lots of people who have had their quote quote elective surgeries put on hold. Students have not been in school, either elementary or high school, for far too long. And I guess that's also part of the plan. What is the plan? I think we all would acknowledge there's no way to invest the dollars into the healthcare system to avoid the next wave that's coming. So it's about managing that. But in terms of schools, making sure that kids are going to schools, that the universities and colleges are open for training that's so desperately required, and having those tools or the rapid screening, vaccines, and I guess the question we will put this to everyone: are you prepared? I mean, if things get worse, what's the plan to make sure we manage through it, short of a lockdown? Because that is probably the line that no one wants to cross.
Oh, absolutely. And it is exactly those kinds of things. We know that, for example, many people, many experts were concerned about what was going to happen after March break. And people thought, maybe we should keep the masking in place a little bit longer just to be safe and not invite a next wave. So I think that cautious approach that's informed by experts really does help us get ahead of the kinds of initiatives we need to take to prevent us going backwards and into another lockdown, because you're right, nobody wants to see that happen. But that also means investments in our schools. I can remember the very first school year, so not the year in 2020, the initial onslaught of COVID-19, but that September, the government was promising 50,000 rapid tests a day to monitor COVID-19 in the schools. They didn't show up. So it's not about bluster, it's about planning. So when it comes to schools, we know we need smaller classrooms. We just do. We need smaller classroom sizes so that we can make sure that students aren't cheek by jowl in classrooms that have poor ventilation, because that still exists in our province. No matter how many times the government says, we're going to send more HEPA filters or more HEPA units to the classrooms, it simply has not been enough. And so let's look at what the other precautions are to prevent, for example, kids from having to be out of school. We know the damage that's been done. Learning loss, mental health, socialization. And right now, the current government is cutting in education at a time when we should be shoring up our kids and making sure that they're doing well and overcoming some of what they've had to endure during the last couple of years. But I have to say, there's a real opportunity to get ahead of anything that's coming our way. So in the healthcare system, yes, there's no doubt that there are something like 21 million surgeries and procedures that are backlogged. But it's not good enough to say that's the way it is. And in some cases, it'll be 4 or 5 years, some experts are saying, before we catch up with all of that. I mean, if you're the person that isn't able to get a cancer screening, even though you're supposed to get one last year, that's not good enough. So the problems in our healthcare system need to be addressed. And yes, there's some long-term planning around that, but there's also some immediate things that we can do to retain workers in our healthcare system, to return workers who have left, and to recruit new workers that are going to stay. Some of that is around the low-wage policy that our current government has maintained that has disrespected our healthcare workers. They are unhappy with the patchwork funding initiatives, whether that's some PSWs getting a bump in pay and others not, whether that's nurses saying they're insulted by the pay for, give us pay and we'll vote for you kind of scheme that came out. There's a bill on the books. It's called Bill 124. It holds workers' wages at 1% at a time when inflation's running at 4 to 5%. That has got to be scrapped. But there are thousands of internationally trained professionals, registered nurses, physicians of every discipline. There are all kinds of folks who we have living here in Ontario who are not able to help us through this crisis, not able to provide the healthcare supports that we need, and yet they are not able to fulfill their dreams in terms of their chosen profession. So we do have some legislation that we put forward. I asked one of our MPPs to put together a plan to deal with the problem that's been ongoing for decades around internationally trained professionals and their inability to work here in Ontario. There was an example of a woman who is a doctor living in Fort Erie, Ontario, across the border from the United States. Every day, that doctor wakes up and she goes across the border to practice as a doctor in Buffalo, because she cannot get through the quagmire of accreditation here in Ontario. And other provinces, again, it's not recreating the wheel. Other provinces, again, do much better at this. Of course, the United States is doing better at this. We need to do better at this. So there are some immediate government tools, if you will, policy tools that we can implement to begin to switch up where we are with our healthcare human resources issues. We need a firm plan, not a bunch of gimmicks, not a bunch of one-off announcements to try to make people feel better about the crisis that we're in, because it's a serious crisis.
This morning, we talked a little bit about the fact that the pandemic has demonstrated where we are, haven't made the investments for decades, frankly, in education, healthcare, infrastructure, long-term care. One of the things we know, and I would say, is that investments need to be made not only in healthcare and education, but many parts of the economy. Business community, I would say, deficits do matter, but you're not going to cut your way back to prosperity. We have to make those investments. The flip side, though, is that business needs to be the engine for growth, for the job creation, for the business investment, to create the tax revenues to pay and for not only the last 2 years of COVID, but for the investments that we know we'll need to make. So as we pivot to maybe the energy and environment file, affordability of electricity, and not only for business but for individuals, a huge concern. Mixing that together with our environmental and the very real need to have a comprehensive plan for climate change. We're moving, and we talked this morning about the move to EV vehicles, electrification of transit. That also puts a huge pressure on the energy sector, power generation sector. We're going to explore some of those things at our Energy and Environment Forum later this spring. But I guess the question is, how do we balance the need for reliable, affordable electricity to drive the economy, and still make the investments in infrastructure around power generation? Like it almost seems like those things are maybe at odds, and we're going to have to find a way to strike a balance.
Well, there is no doubt that that is one of the biggest pieces that we need to keep in the forefront. I want to say that first of all, we do have something called the Green New Democratic Deal, which is our roadmap to greening the economy. It does address a number of these pieces, but there is also, there's been some, how do I describe it politely? There's been some political meddling in the energy sector for some time now. And it started under the former government when the long-term energy planning process became politicized, and it's just continued to this day. So what we really do need to do is have that hard look at how do we make that planning focused on our needs, that our industrial needs, our employment needs, our consumption needs, our green economy needs, and somewhat take the politics out of that. One of the things I've been talking to my team about is really putting together the brightest minds when it comes to the solutions, because there is no quick fix. And if we're going to grapple with this in a serious, reliable way that investors can feel confident in, then we need to do that homework. But there is, I have talked to OPG actually about this already, particularly around the desire that we have to green our transit systems, for example. So electrifying, working with municipalities to electrify local systems, but also electrifying the GO system. We have, plans around electric vehicle production and moving to targets for EV use that are pretty ambitious. All of these things are going to require that kind of energy, and so that's certainly top of priority for us. But it's also acknowledging that we are not going to get to, for example, a place where the vast majority of Ontarians are driving electric vehicles without appropriate incentives. And so we've made those commitments as well. We will be incentivizing the purchase of electric vehicles to help encourage Ontarians to purchase those vehicles. And it will be an amount that is competitive with what's already out there. We will be making massive investments in charging stations, not ripping them out of the ground like the current government had done. And we've lost 4 years really in terms of progress on that file. So we are going to be making those investments as well. We also have a rebate for the installation, I guess, of the charging capacity in houses, as well as changing to planning and building codes to make sure new builds are also building that infrastructure in at the ground level.
And I think Scott from Toyota was saying this morning, in order to hit the targets, you're going to need millions of charging stations across the province, not the 15,000 we have. It's that kind of comprehensive view of saying, we want electric vehicles. What are all the things that come from that? And power needs is going to be a big part of that. Listen, one of the issues which is top of mind, both for the private sector, for service providing agencies, but just families anywhere in Waterloo Region and frankly across the province, is housing affordability or affordable housing, supportive housing, the whole range of issues. Maybe just talk generally about what your plan is around affordability of housing in the broadest sense, because it certainly is something we had, I think it was last week, if I'm not mistaken, headline in the Waterloo Region Record that the average home in Waterloo Region is over $1 million now. It's pricing people out of the market. The rental market is tight as well. That's an important issue, not only for Waterloo Region, but across the province.
No, it absolutely is. In fact, I think it's one of the top of mind issues everywhere in Ontario. We have a plan, it's called the Homes You Can Afford, and it really does look at the entire spectrum. And you're right to identify how heartbreaking it is when, for example, a young family wants to buy their first home and they're outbid by huge corporations that are purchasing homes, often hundreds, if not thousands of homes as financial assets, as opposed to places for people to live. And people are being priced out of the market pretty much everywhere now. So we need to cool down that speculation. We've, for some time now, been trying to urge our government to increase the speculation taxes, not just in the GTA, but in the entire province. My understanding is there might be an announcement coming today about that very thing that we've been trying to get the Conservatives to do. It is a part of our plan. I think we announced our plan 2 years ago now, actually. It also includes, though, the acknowledgement that rents are out of control as well. We were talking to Laurier representatives this morning about the fact that young people can't find a rentable unit to be able to afford to go to school. People are graduating from university and can't stay in the community to contribute to the exciting growth that's happening here without an affordable place to live. So we do have to get back to this commitment to stabilize rents and to acknowledge that housing is a place for people to live. You cannot build your life without stable housing. And so for some, that means rental housing. For others, that means being able to afford to buy a home. So we do have a plan to help young people get into the market with a shared equity loan with the government that would provide 10% of down payment price to try to help those folks, especially young people. It breaks my heart. Young people who have actually been doing the right thing and saving all the way along. And now they're, getting to be close to 30 and they're thinking, okay, now's the time. I'm going to go find a house, only to find out that the buying power of the down payment they saved up all of this time has dwindled to nowhere near what they need. People are leaving the communities they love. They're giving up dreams of growing their families because they simply can't afford to be housed in a way that's adequate. So there's a lot of work to be done there. We have plans for every piece of it, including the most vulnerable people who require supports to maintain their housing. And so we've got some plans in that regard as well. And, I know that folks think, wow, so we're going to invest in housing and we're going to invest in home care and health care and long-term care. And we're going to invest in business supports and we're going to invest in all of these things. And as you identified, where does the money come from? But I think it's important to state very clearly that as a leader, but also should I become the premier of this province, I am committed to managing the finances of the province in a responsible way. And so do we need to deal with some of the things, all of the things really, that COVID has, has laid bare? Yes, we do. And so there needs to be some long-term financial planning in that regard. And I think we all agree that that's necessary. And I would agree with your comment that I think folks who are engaged in business know this very well. You can't cut your way to prosperity, but you do have to be thoughtful and wise and disciplined and set short and medium term, but also long-term goals. The only way we are going to be successful is if we do have growth, economic growth. But that economic growth has to also be a part of the solution in terms of some of the challenges that we face around people being able to have a job that pays the bills. Right. And so it's not just a matter of having a job, it's a matter of having a job that pays the bills. And I know in this kind of region, you've done fantastic work around growing economic activity and bringing great jobs and great investment and great businesses to the table. But how do we scale all that up, and how do we make sure that we're jealously protecting those gains while continuing to grow them, because it will help not only the region but the entire province.
So as we think about housing, I mean, the importance of the private sector in making the investment, government will never be able to spend enough to solve it does require investors and the development community to create more units. You also have consumers and protecting the needs of families and consumers for affordability. There's a housing task force recommendation to limit exclusionary zoning as of right, so that residential units or properties can go up to 4 units. I mean, we know that we're going to have to upsize in some areas. Those are pretty complex trade-offs between investors and consumers, between established neighborhoods and having access for more families to join and have a place to live. How do you put that together? I mean, it seems like that you can only do one or the other, and I think we need to do both.
Well, I think that there are some tools, Ian, in that regard that have been successful in other jurisdictions, and that we are looking at as well in our housing plan. So, for an example, inclusionary zoning. Inclusionary zoning is something we've been pushing for a very long time. It's true that the private developers are the ones that are going to be building a lot of the higher density homes as well. We talk about things like ensuring that when we're building mass transit infrastructure, for example, that we build higher density housing on those corridors, which makes a great deal of sense. So a part of the equation is the private developers that are going to build that housing are going to benefit significantly from the public infrastructure that is created, that they can then take advantage of and sell their condos and those kinds of things. Those are all really great. So then the kind of paying it forward, if you will, of the developers needs to be the inclusionary zoning piece. So the public investment, yes, in the infrastructure, but then a part of the return on the public investment, perhaps is the way of thinking of it, is ensuring that some of those units are affordable, market affordable. And there are going to be people who are not going to be able to afford market rents either. And so, as I've mentioned, that's something that we're really concerned about. But the other thing is, and I hear this from many different places, that one of the things that we're not providing really is a lot of that what we used to call, I think what we still call is like the starter home kind of idea. You can't even get a starter. There's no such thing as a starter home in Ontario anymore. But we need to start thinking about the planning rules and the development rules around the duplexes or the semis, for example, like semi-detached housing and stacked townhouses and that kind of the kind of missing middle, if you will, of the types of housing that would be another way to help younger people into the market, new families or first-time home buyers into the market at that more moderate style of housing and more moderate cost of housing, and then they can obviously move to more expensive housing in time if that's their choice. But there really is a need to kind of fill in that piece. And we've talked about things, and it's in our plan as well, things like Granny Flats, things like laneway housing. And again, it would be important to work with municipalities in ensuring that that the implementation of these kinds of solutions is appropriate. But we can't continue to push those ideas away as inappropriate for community. I think that there are big solutions there that we have. We just need to get serious about providing the opportunity for that to happen.
So we're very blessed in this region to have actually 6 different sections of the economy: manufacturing, agriculture, certainly technology is driving everything. And our post-secondary institutions, Laurier, Waterloo, Conestoga, are a big part of that. Our friends from Communitech do a fantastic job of supporting new businesses, new innovation. That should be a priority for whomever is government to drive new jobs, new opportunities, and new markets. One of the things that has become a problem, not only for technology, frankly, all business, is on the procurement side of getting that first contract, particularly for small and medium-sized business that don't have that expert in going through the Merck system, or where you have to know the secret handshake and the code in order to get a government contract. Small business don't know what that is, but there's lots of small businesses that could provide innovative approaches. They're creating jobs right here in the community. So I want to draw together the importance of the talent that's being generated here by the post-secondary, the innovators that are creating the new technology and the new businesses that should drive our economy, and government procurement, because that can be the first contract that new company with new talent gets that new job and keeps those jobs, that prosperity, that tax revenue here in Ontario. I said to you earlier this morning, this is not I think this has been like the caramel secret. Whoever can figure it out first could probably sell it across the country. I'm old enough that, for those of you that aren't, I'll tell you about caramel secret later. But I do think it's important that be a priority for the government, that we need to take the new technologies and the small businesses and figure out a way that we do get that procurement. I said earlier, 12 years ago, I had my first meeting with a minister at the time, who was a local minister, saying we're really going to make sure that small and medium-sized businesses have an opportunity for the billions of dollars the Ontario government in procurement. And it's almost like it's an unsolvable problem, and it can't be. So how would you kind of address that as Premier of the province? How are you going to address that? Because I think it's a hugely important part of the tax revenue that you're going to need for paying for all the things that we need to pay for.
It's really important that we peel back that onion and get to the barriers to solve it. It's interesting that you call it the caramel secret, the golden handshake, or whatever it is that you can describe, because it is absolutely frustrating for people, and it's frustrating for elected folks as well. And I know that the MPP for this area, Catherine Fife, has done a lot of work on not only that piece, but on diversification of access to government procurement opportunities as well. And one of the things I would say is absolutely necessary is to have conversations like this, identify the actual barriers, and then start dismantling them. And you're not going to get there if you don't have somebody shepherding that. And I think that we've heard loudly and clearly that this is an ongoing problem. I've been to Communitech. I'm sure it was Communitech I was at, seeing this really cool innovation in assistance for knee replacement,
Yes,
or hip replacement, or those kinds of ball joint kind of things, and it was amazing, fantastic. But the response that I got when asking, so how do you get there? What do you do next? There is just like a brick wall. It's like a brick wall. You cannot get there. We also toured another plant another innovator that was had technology around disinfecting spaces in hospitals, couldn't get through the Ministry of Health, was selling the product around the world,
Yeah.
but not here in Ontario. And that's just unacceptable. And so I think acknowledging that there's a problem is the first step, obviously, but sitting down and listening to and learning from and digging into those barriers and then making the commitment to actually dismantling them is got to be what we do. It's not good enough to say, well, that's the way the Ministry of Health works, or that's the way procurement works. It doesn't have to be that way. It does not have to be that way.
Well, and I think what's important too is that we need to respect, we're a trading nation. We need to have access market. I think we heard that from our friends at Toyota and others.
Absolutely.
Is we can't be short-sighted. On the other hand, we can at least, and I think this is all that business is asking for, is a level playing field for small domestic local businesses, that they have a fair shake to get those procurement dollars, because we shouldn't be restricted or behind the 8 ball as a domestic local Ontario company. And so I think the right approach is to get those people around the table. Shakiba hears this in Guelph. I hear it in Greater KW. You'd hear it right across the province. I think there are folks that can and are willing and able to be at that table to say, here's how we can fix it, and then we just need to get on with it. So that's encouraging.
Well, and the other thing that came up that I think is important that we identified this morning in our conversation is the number of companies that did step up during the pandemic and that changed their product to PPE, for example, and other things that they were asked to do, and we're sliding back to the old supply chain ways, and we need to think seriously about that as well.
Well, the Canadian Shield story is one from an education company to doing plastic shields to doing face masks, Eclipse Automation supplying millions of masks locally. Those are, it's important not to forget that business stepped up. Listen, one of the things we talk about investment, and I think it's going to be important that we drive, that the economy needs to be supercharged can't leave people behind, but we need the private sector to be really creating the jobs, the tax revenues in order to be able to do the investments in things we've talked about. One of the things that we are seeing is a chronic shortage of large investment-ready employment lands right across the province of Ontario. Our friend Tony Lamantia from the Waterloo Economic Development Corporation would say we certainly have an issue with that here locally. So I guess the question is, and there's a local component to this, but the province also needs to be looking at how it can, its role in making sure that we have shovel-ready sites to promote greenfield investment, because we're fortunate to have gotten a $4.3 billion investment in a battery plant for the Windsor Essex area. That's awesome, but we need more of that. That will drive these new advanced manufacturing and other industries. How would your government expand the inventory of shovel-ready sites to promote Ontario investment and anchor companies like the automakers and others that are going to drive innovation, supply chain companies right down the line?
No, it's a really great question, and there's a couple of pieces. I think that certainly the leadership at the local level needs to be supported in the identification of employment lands, but they also need to make sure, we also need as a province to make sure that the identified employment lands don't get overturned to become housing subdivisions at some unaccountable tribunal board that doesn't respect the extremely difficult and lengthy work it takes to identify those employment lands in the first place. So it's a matter of not only identifying those lands through the proper planning process with the proper community consultation and the proper processes at the local level, but then to protect those lands as well. Those lands need to be protected as employment lands and not be converted or rezoned to other uses. Because that's not, because it takes a long time to go through that process. I think that when you step in and Bigfoot, a community that's already done the planning work, and you decide with an MZO that you're going to take the community in a different direction, not only is that disrespectful, but it creates community backlash. and then everything gets stalled off and you don't really progress in terms of the initiative. And so I think we have to be really thoughtful about respecting the local voice, making sure that we are respecting the planning principles, while at the same time protecting those employment lands from rezonings that take us backwards.
Okay, now we've talked a little bit about innovation. I think maybe I'll wrap this together with municipalities in the post-secondary. I mean, we are fortunate here in Waterloo Region. We said this morning, Waterloo, Conestoga College, driving new talent as a great resource for this community. We're very fortunate to have strong municipalities, the region, the three cities and the townships, and it's a great community in which to do business. And I think we're fortunate here in Waterloo Region, into Guelph and through Woodstock and where we have and Stratford. We have lots of to commend this part of the province of being a place to invest. But it relies on strong municipalities, and we cannot have weak municipalities, whether it's on the planning piece, whether we know that COVID is not going to, with the analogy I used with you this morning, is it's not going to be elastic band that once we let go, we're just going to go back to normal. It's going to take time for transit usage to go back up. It's going to take time for investments to be made, for people to get back to their normal life. And so how do we support the need for that innovation, strong municipalities, and the context of if we don't have a strong community that's prepared to and able to make decisions around investment, we're going to miss out on the innovation that's coming from places like Communitech and coming from the universities and the college. Try and wrap those together, because I think it's important. The philosophy around how we try and bring those things together is an important signal and message that business wants to hear.
Well, I think the important piece to identify is the collaboration piece. You have to have partners at the provincial level that are prepared to collaborate with business, collaborate with municipalities, but also provide support that helps the community to move forward. So I think about, for example, you mentioned transit. One of the things that we've seen is transit systems across the province, in urban settings particularly, take a huge hit. With the COVID-19, ridership is down. Many transit systems rely heavily on ridership at the fare box to be able to provide the kind of service that people need. You're not going to get people back into work without getting their bus route back on track, or their LRT working as frequently or running as frequently as is necessary. And so absolutely making sure that we are stepping up as a provincial government to support things like local transit, not only in the aftermath of this pandemic, not only getting back to where we were before, but acknowledging that going forward, transit systems are about economic development, as well as about moving people around, as well as about in some ways a social good in terms of affordability. So like other places, like I think about New York, for example, that the New York transit system doesn't rely only on New York City for its funding. There's state funding. I believe that there's also national funding that goes into the operating of New York City's transit system. We need to do that in Ontario. We know that municipalities do not have the fiscal capacity to afford these kinds of investments, and so the provincial government needs to be there. And it used to be that provincial government here in Ontario paid 50% of the net operating costs of transit systems in our cities. I don't know if folks are aware of that, but that was the good old days. There's just no way that we can move forward appropriately with transit if we are not getting back to that kind of a model. And so that's a commitment we've made. We will be carrying 50% of the net operating costs of transit systems to help with increasing the frequency, increasing the reach, of municipal transit systems, as an example. And so going back to the beginning, it's about collaboration. It's about the conversation. It's about the partnership and the respect that comes with those conversations. And I'm smiling because I don't know how many times I've been to the Association of Municipalities of Ontario our conventions, right? Their annual convention, or how many times I've heard, government ministers talk about, a new partnership or a respectful partnership or a partnership with municipalities, and it's never come to pass. And I think that that's a shame on us. We need to fix that.
So, and maybe to just go back on the innovation, I do think it's important that it's easy to go back to what we know, and it's bureaucracies will, unless they're really pushed by the political elite or the masters, will default to what they know.
Sure.
And so I think when we talk about innovation, and again, we talked about procurement, that's one. We talk about supporting innovators, and whether that's financial or otherwise, I guess this is what, and this is more of a general question, but I mean, innovation is something that's got to start with business. That's where it primarily comes from, but it also has to be reflected in government. And so, I mean, our expectation is that in municipal elections in the fall, but certainly in the spring's election, is transformative, innovative approaches to how we deliver government services and how we support business going to be, your one of your foundational policies or philosophies of how you'll govern as premier?
Well, I mean, absolutely. And I think that one of the things that have made clear over the years as the leader of my party is that this kind of collaboration, this kind of innovation can only come with relationships. And when I first got to be the leader of the party many years ago now, which is a good thing, right? It's experience, as I said this morning. But what I was able to build relationships with the with business community, with chambers, with boards of trade, because I get it. I get how important that relationship is. And the thing that I think is important, most important as an overarching kind of theme, is that it is broken. And so we got to fix it. We can't avoid acknowledging that these things are broken and that we are not achieving what we have the capacity to achieve, and that means we have to do things differently.
Okay, we're at the. They gave you the 3-minute warning 2 minutes ago, but we're still going to have. We're going to have 2 quick questions. One, and so we only got about a minute and a half. All day 2 weeks ago, we talked about that earlier today. It has been announced, it has been funded, but we want to take the opportunity to do the ethanol pledge on that, because we cannot afford for there to be any delay in that. Connecting Waterloo Region to Toronto is hugely important for talent and moving business back across, going through Guelph. You're still committed to getting that done and accelerating it if possible, but that's the commitment and the province have made. Is that still a commitment of the NDP? Absolutely
It is. Catherine Fife has been fighting that battle for many, many years. Look, with Silicon Valley of the North, I mean, let's not hesitate to continue to have that grow. And absolutely, you had us at all way, because then we knew the rest of the conversation and what it was. Absolutely there, 100%.
Last question in literally 30 seconds, because I'm getting evil eye from my staff. Then our first meeting, we can't have a calamity on our first event back in 2 years, by the way. So thank you for joining us. Hospitality and tourism, that sector has been hugely hit. One of the issues that we know is that they're having trouble finding the talent, because there's shortages in every business sector. So it's going to be hard for them to get fully back up to 100% because they just don't have the staff. So what would your government, what's your approach to streamline the process of, because we talked about immigration this morning, foreign workers and immigration is going to be a big part of the solution. Is that's part of your plan for addressing the talent shortages?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. The talent shortages are real, and we need to make it easier for people to come to Ontario to solve some of those problems. And we need to do that in collaboration with the federal government, because you know that there's a federal role there as well. But absolutely, and as I mentioned before, and I'm just going to say this 10 seconds, it's all parts of the workforce. It's all parts of the workforce, and when we have some of that talent here already, and they cannot find the pathway to work at their profession, nurses, doctors, folks like that, then shame on us. We need to fix it.
Listen, thanks so much. That's all the time we do have for today. Dana from our team is going to pop right up. Thank you. A small token of our appreciation. Some treats from Waterloo Region here as a thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.
And just as we wrap up, I would like to take a moment to thank once again our sponsors for this series. Our title sponsor, Manulife, prestige sponsor, Deloitte, our platinum sponsor, Google, silver sponsor, Clack, bronze sponsor, KW Association of Realtors, our event sponsor and partner, the Guelph Chamber of Commerce, and our hosts here, Cellar 52 and Guild Catering. And of course, a special thanks to all of you for attending today and your continued support in making these events possible. We do have 3 more events in the Provincial Leaders Series, with the next event scheduled for tomorrow in this very place, Thursday, March 31st. For full details and to register and view online, visit our website at greaterkwchamber.com. Thanks so much for joining us today, and thank you once again, Andrea, for making time for us. Have a great day.